So often someone will have a flower like this and ask what can be done in relation to submitting it to a competition or a gallery. And right up front, the issue is not that it isn't a beautiful flower, it is, but all the stuff in front of it is distracting. So first thing is to know, do you have a good composition? And when you're looking through your viewfinder, simply move around. If you moved to the right of this, or if you have someone with you, break the stem of the flower and let them hold it somewhere else. But I want to show from there. So this is not something that you can do anything with this to have it used in a competition or anything like that. Someone had submitted this one and the flower looks very good. I thought, well, I could do more things with it to help what's going on. And the first thing I did was to think about sharpening it a bit or darkening the background. So let me take it into Photoshop and show you some easy techniques to improve an image like this. Today, during the morning review of the Booth Photography Guild, I was very hesitant to say, why don't you flip it? And I didn't say it at all, but somebody else did say it at one time. But on this one, I certainly would consider flipping it horizontally so that you're looking into the face of the flower. This one, the beautiful flower, but you're really coming in from the left and your eye sees the center, but not as strongly as if you flip it. A wonderful part about selections now in Photoshop, Adobe has improved this a lot. I'll come up to, on the toolbar, 1, 2, 3, the fourth one down, and the quick selection tool. When I do that, it gives me up in the toolbar, it gives me an option of select subject. And when I click on that, it does its work to find just the subject itself. Let me click that again. It's working. And when I say it does a really good job, see on this one, which is fairly easy to see separated from the background, it selected the image really well. That gives me a lot of flexibility to do things with the background, with the flower. So with the flower selected, but there's a little piece here, right here in the lower right corner that isn't selected. So I will come to my quick selection tool again, and at the top, remove, which is a little minus sign, or I could hold down the Alt key and it changes it to a minus sign. And I don't want to take it out.
John,
Yes,
I have a quick question. How do you get your ants so dark? My ants are almost barely visible.
really? Ah, I don't know. I haven't changed anything in my software anywhere that does that. I don't know. I'll look into that for you. So I wanted to include that little part. So with the plus, and actually when you bring the quick selection tool in, it comes in as a plus, meaning you're adding to your image. If you hold the Alt key down, it becomes a minus. You're taking away from the image of the selection, not the image of the selection. And you can make it small and stay inside of what you want to select. But it did a really good job on selecting this. First thought you should do is think about the background itself. Echo, you can come up, select inverse. Now the selection is the background, not the flower. Number of things to do with that. Come over to the layers palette, and at the bottom, the little circle with half black, half white, click on that and come up to levels. And when we have levels and we have a selection, it builds a mask. And wherever it's black, it will not have an effect. That a levels adjustment will not have effect wherever it's black. Wherever it's white, it will. So I will darken the background. In fact, I could take it all the way down almost entirely and just have the flowers. So I would just darken the background. Look at the aspect of what happens. It makes that flower more three-dimensional. I'll click on the background to select those pixels, get the burn tool, because I would like to darken that lower right corner a little bit. It's a little too bright, and up in the upper portion, and certainly in that upper left area. One thing to keep in mind always is, where will the eye go first? And most people, all of us, tend to look exactly what we photographed and not look around the rest of the image. But judges for competitions, galleries, look at all those other things. So look around your image and remove something that isn't helping your main part of your image. And on this side, it's that stuff on the right-hand side. So look at the difference of what we did. Let me go back in history. With some simple steps, open, we flipped it, and then did the selection of the background, and we have that. How do I get the dancing ants back on the flower? Well, I could go up and do quick selection again, a subject selection, but since I have a mask with a selection on it, if you hold the control or option key, I guess it is, control or, no, I don't know what it is on the Mac. If you do that and click it, yeah, click that mask, the dancing ants come back. And I want just the flowers. So I'll go to select, inverse. And I will take it into filter camera raw, because there's some nice features in camera raw to enhance the flower itself. For example, clarity, move that and it sharpens the image, just moving that a little bit. Watch, I'll move it to the other side, how it can blur it, or I can sharpen it. And they've added this other slider in last year or so, texture. So add texture to the flower. Come down to detail, and their sharpened slider now has some really good effect on the images. So now come back to the image, remove the dancing ants, and look at the difference of the camera raw to the detail. And as I'm seeing this, even looking at it on my screen, the upper right area is a little bright for my taste, that I would want that to be a little darker up there so that it brings the eye back into the flower. So all the way up to open, flip it. Notice the background. Now, notice the three-dimensionality of the flower that way. Quite a difference. And I'm showing these because so many times, and I did it, we all do it, we see a flower, it is so beautiful, and we capture it and not look around all the other aspects of it, of what can be done to it. And be sure that your depth of field is good so you can do the kinds of things I just did here. That's the important part about flowers. That one in particular. One thing to be aware of when photographing flowers is to be sure you get closer and try to use a lens that it will allow you to get three-dimensionality. And I'm going to show this one to you later because this is Larry Baker's. He did some really interesting things to it. But see here, right away, and you can see it in your viewfinder when you're doing it, this bright white area is distracting. I'm sure, because I know what his end image is going to look like, he already was thinking, well, I'm just going to change the background anyway. What I want is the detail in those flowers. So that's what you need to be thinking about when you are photographing flowers, is what is it that I'm capturing? Do I have areas around it that I can work on Did I get close enough to it? This one, for example. So interesting because it has the reflection. Yet, all of this in the upper portion of the image really doesn't relate to what's happening here. This reflection and is the main element. So why not think about, it's all right to capture it that way, but if you could capture it differently when you're shooting it, that would be good also. Maybe we'll have just a little bit of that pad and concentrate on that portion of the image. That may be too much crop because now it doesn't have as much impact as what it had when we opened it. So maybe it's too much. Come down a little bit, just play with them a little bit to see how you want to place this flower in the image and make this a little bit more of a vertical this way. So think about your cropping. The computer's running very slow here today. The next thing is to think about the blueness and can we create more three-dimensionality. But before we go there, we have some bright areas here that are distracting, and they are so easy to remove. Just take these spot healing brush and come right through them. They're gone. This one, gone. Even this part over here, to remove that so that the eye doesn't come up to that area. So just those little pieces there. And when you are submitting to a competition, those little distractions are so important because the judge needs to make a decision of yours against some other image, and those things will be the deciding factor. The other thing on this one is the background and the shadow area of the reflection. So let's take it into Adobe Camera Raw. It's one of my favorite places to go with images. I do it almost instantly with bringing images in once I have the crop that I want, because I can do things here in the basic tab, such as add some clarity, let's just sharpen up that flower a little bit more, add some texture to that flower, come down and add maybe some vibrance. Now, when you add vibrance, it is increasing only the muted colors. If you add saturation, it increases the colors everywhere in the image. And I think a little bit here is very nice. The shadows, let's open up the shadows. Go to the shadow slider and move that to the right. And the reflections, the detail in the reflection is so beautiful. The water, good color. How can we darken the water without doing a lot of selection and playing with that? Well, when you have a color that dominates the entire image and you want to change that entire color, come down to Color Mixer and click on Luminance rather than saturation in this case, Luminance. Click on the Targeted Adjustment tool, which is in the upper right aspect there, right across from the word adjust. Put your cursor in the blue, hold down the left mouse button and move it to the left. And it just darkens that color. Now I see they've made a change to this, which I need to learn what they are doing with this now. But that's how you can darken that color. And sometimes I think, oh, it didn't do it the way I wanted it. I'll just go back in. They've improved that tool, and I need to find out how to use it better. But in this case, I wanted it a little darker. Just come back in, because I haven't learned the tool yet, Luminance, put it in there and move it to the right, and it darkens it. Now look at how that flower stands out, good detail in the shadows. And the reason I'm showing this is that when we are so taken by what we've photographed, we see what we saw when we were there photographing it rather than maybe what we're presenting. and the judges only see what you're presenting. Now, given this final presentation, I would darken, and I will darken the upper part here a little bit more. So I bring the eye down even more to that flower, because dark recedes and light brings you into it. Watch the presentation now of from open to final. Can't believe how slow my machine is today. There you go. So flowers need to dominate the image. If you are photographing a flower and submitting it to a competition, you really need to think about, how does that say exactly what I wanted to say immediately? Let's look at this one in the sense of well presented, good depth of field on it, has texture, it's very nice. The issue, again, for me, related to judging this against another one, or the one that we just worked on, is the amount of space on the right-hand side. Just crop that in. How easy is that? Just crop that in. That emphasizes that flower even more. And maybe open the stem a little bit. And one way to do that easily is dodge, not on highlights, but dodge midtones. Make the brush a little bigger. And down through there so that I see the stem filling that bottom portion a little bit more. Very nice. And I like color. So I'm getting the sponge tool, saturate maybe on 34%, make it a little bigger, and just open up some color here. From open. See that empty space now? That, I hope that starts to bother you, because then you will look at your own images differently. Removing that makes that image stand out a lot. Really emphasizes and bringing the stem in. So it was a very good image to begin with. We have some just minor changes to it. We get so taken with the beauty of what we've captured that we don't think about that. Here's the other one that I saw recently. Somebody did, these are not mine, somebody did this image, and the rule of thumb is odd number of things, odd number of objects, odd number of things in your image, never an even number, especially not two, because then your eye bounces back and forth between the two. So there are really two images here. You could crop out and decide which one you want to use. Let's do this one on the left-hand side. Again, a vertical. Works very nicely as a vertical. Maybe even crop down a little on the top so that the viewer sees a top part more. This is done artistically, however the photographer decided to do that. I would add just a little bit more sharpness to it by going into Adobe Camera Raw, going up to the Basic T tab, add a little clarity. That becomes much more three-dimensional to me. It was a little flat. That's another aspect of flowers, even artistic presentations. The more three-dimensional you can make it, the more the flower stands out. Cropping, there's nothing sophisticated about, well, maybe not sophisticated, but nothing complex about what I'm talking about here. Let's look at this one. See, get so taken by, oh, look at that bug on there. Oh, and the flower is so beautiful. Well, look at the background, all this bright area. A viewer who isn't standing next to you when you see that little bug, and so we'll just see all that bright area. On this one, there's a number of things that needs to be done. But one of them, even to come in and just simply crop down before we do some things, or would do some things in the background. I'm not going to take the time to do that even more, but the idea of coming in and emphasizing what it was that you were seeing when you were standing there and wanted to bring it out to the viewer. Simple cropping, nothing complex. Same as the calla lily that I had earlier, this empty space on the left. It doesn't lead in very well to make it any better than what the flower is. So if you crop in on that, that really, just that brings the eye to that flower. Now in this case, I would want to select the flower. So I'll do select subject, see how well it does it, and just darken the background. In fact, it did it really well. I'll use the tool and select, I can select the stem, maybe, yes, good. Select, deselect, I mean, inverse. And in this case, I'll use levels. Darken that background. Look how that flower becomes three-dimensional. And you can
John?
suggest some other things on it. You have a question?
Yeah, does levels give you a solid black background? Is it absolute?
It can give you a solid black.
Oh,
If
that's what
I,
yeah, okay,
if
yeah.
I take the left slider here and move it all the way, that becomes pure black.
Okay, thank you.
Look at the difference of this flower, even keeping it as the black background from there, and how much more impact does that have? Flowers, important to have the detail.
John, before you close that,
Yes,
the green stem where it meets the flower
Yep, yep.
have a little too much black on the upper right.
yes. So I could take the brush tool, click on the mask, and remove that by painting black on it or white. I have to think which one I want to do here, but let's change it to white. Make my brush a little harder. I'm simply adjusting the mask and allowing the bottom part to show through. Again, the impact of this versus this. I like the black background, but now that I even see this, I'll click on the background. I'd like to take it into Adobe Camera Raw, use the clarity, sharpen it up a little bit more. And clarity creates a little bit of a contrast in the midtones, because what clarity is really doing is darkening the midtones, not touching the highlights or the blacks, and add a little texture to the flower. Watch the difference if you can see it on your monitor from there, moving it really to the texture. Much more three-dimensional. What? Look at this. Look, just from back there to there. Simple, very simple effects.
John, this is Jim. I have a question about centering the photo. I read
Yes.
somewhere, probably the internet, they said that the photo or the picture would be more interesting if the subject wasn't centered exactly in the middle.
Yes, and I think it depends on the flower. That calla lily I thought worked really well. This work, the one I just did, works fine because it's a full impact. So I don't know how to address it other than that. It depends on what flower it is and how much of the flower is taking up the entire room of the image. I can see some
Okay.
issues on some other kinds of flowers doing that. We're running out of time a little bit, but because I want to get to the landscape. But here's an interesting image, and I see these kinds of images all the time, where the hummingbird was at a distance that the lens they were using couldn't get up close enough. Well, how about we crop in on what this story is all about? The story is about the bird coming in, the hummingbird coming in to that flower. And of course, you all can decide on how you want to crop. Do you want the bud in the upper portion in there or not, and those kind of things. But look at, all I want you to see at first is the impact of this and how your eye goes right to what the action is versus all that other area. And on this one, I would like to try it, but I don't think it really will be the difference of, and as many times as I say, let it come in from the left and come into the flower, I like it personally, like this one this way better. Let's try just using select subject so that we could darken the background and let this become more three-dimensional. And I will hold the shift key down and remove some of that selection. Remove this selection down the lower left. I have everything else. That looks good. Select inverse. Come down to levels. Darken the background just a bit.
That's a huge difference.
Isn't that amazing? Watch. From there to there, or even from the crop to here. And we didn't do a lot of real sophisticated things. I would do, they don't need to be sophisticated to make a big impact. I would bring the burn tool in. Oh, I clicked on the burn tool. I bring it over and this sign, what's happening? When something isn't working the way you want, one of three things. Do you still have the correct tool? Is there something in the options bar that you did wrong? Or are you on the correct layer? I'm not on the pixel layer, so the burn tool can't be used on the levels layer. So I needed to click on the background layer because that's where the pixels are located. And I will make this brush a little smaller, darken up in here in the corner just a bit. Darken this corner here, this little bit of highlight here, down here, in through here. And in fact, on this one, I may try, see if the spot healing brush will do anything for me. Yes, it worked very nicely. Right in there, here, right there. How about that? Fairly easy, right?
John,
I-
personal preference, but if you flipped it, I would see the bird leading into the picture
Yep,
and the flower as a block on the right-hand side,
Yep.
so you don't bleed.
yep. In fact, now that I see the cropping and so on, I agree with you. I think this is a much better presentation because this really, all of this on the right-hand side, I call containment. It holds you into the image. Your eye comes across, that contains you coming back into the image. One last thing on this one is to go into Adobe Camera Raw, even with all the background this way and so on, and use the clarity to sharpen it up a little bit more, give it some texture.
John,
Yes,
now, you ever considered replacing a bad background with textures?
absolutely. Yes, yes,
Another way to do that. Right.
yes. Once we had the background, we could make it anything we want it to be. We can even use gradient backgrounds and things. Maybe I'll do that one of the classes. I'll show you how to do something.
Okay.
As I'm showing this now, I see some things, this little highlight down here. I would want to take care of that a little bit. And this little highlight here, and one here and here. I know that's getting picky, but that's exactly what makes your image have more effect on a judge. One last thing that I've learned in the past also is to use the burn tool. And instead of using it on midtones, to use it on shadows. And that means it will only darken the darkest pixels. So I can make that bird a little bit more three-dimensional because I'm darkening only the darkest pixels within the bird. And
Which
turn my
tool-
cell phone off.
Which tool are you on, John?
I'm up at the burn tool and up in the options bar, the drop down, don't do midtones, do shadows. And do it at a lower percentage, maybe 10, 12, 13. I had it on 14. And when you run it across, it will not darken the midtones and it won't darken the highlights. It will only darken the darkest pixels. So you create more of a 3 dimension. And one of the things I've done with eyes on animals, people, whatever, see this, the bird's eye? I don't know that there are enough pixels in this one because this is very small crop of an image, but one way to bring that out is to take the dodge tool, put it on highlights, make it very small, size of the eye, run it across the eye a little bit, put it on midtones, open up that whole area within the eye, and then go to the burn tool on shadows, and you now have created contrast in that area, and you've brought that eye out even more. Let's take a look at that. From there to there. So what a difference of that image that we're seeing here from probably what the person had in mind when they shot it. Three-dimensionality, very important. All right, let's go to some landscapes.
John, can I say one little quick thing?
Certainly.
When I'm photographing flowers and down on the ground, and if it's my flowers, I can clip off a weed or,
Yes,
something in the way. But what I do, I carry a clothespin, a spring
yes,
type clothespin in my bag,
good for
and
you.
just move a limb out of your way or
Yes,
a twig or something, and then it doesn't hurt it, then you let it go. And back out
absolutely.
of your way for that flower.
I
Great
carry
idea.
a lot of pipe cleaners in my bag.
Okay,
Yes.
good.
Yes, great. Before I go to the landscape, I played with this one the other day and I thought, oh, I need to show this. Oh, and I want to show Larry Baker's. First, of course, I will flip this one. And a neat thing to do, of all the other things we talked about, well, do it quickly into Adobe Camera Raw and just do the clarity and texture. But I wanted to show you an artistic aspect of this. Come up to filter gallery. Click on textures, come over to textures, click on sandstone, and look at the artistic aspect of that. And you can change the amount of texture you're putting onto this image and click OK. I would do a little bit more with levels, just a little bit to bring that out a little more. Look how artistic that looks. Let's open it. Flipped it. Very nice as it is, and could have made a selection of the flower and darkened the background, changed it, all those kind of things. But even without doing that, what an interesting presentation. Very simple.